Yeah.
The summer coming to Dunn,
Yeah.
I lost a brother.
Yeah.
Jeremy was, I think, the only person who I shared that with.
The whole time?
The whole time.
Wow.
So my brother was killed in July of 73.
Yeah.
I showed up to Dunn in August of 73.
My God.
Yeah, and, didn't realize probably until 5, 6, 7 years later, oh, so that's what being in shock is, right?
Yeah.
Because I think I was sort of
Wow.
detached from things.
Wow. Welcome to the Whole Student Podcast with Cal Balaven. Whole Student refers to the magical moment when a student is fully seen, heard, and known. This is a spark of a relationship between student and teacher, where the former is catalyzed on a journey beyond what they thought possible, and the latter is a proud advisor cheering from the sidelines. The Whole Student Podcast asks guests to reflect back on their moment, the person who became a transformative teacher in their lives, and on the journey they were set upon. Our guest today is Guy Walker. Originally from Compton, California, Guy attended local public schools before enrolling at Dunn School. He graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics, political science, and Black studies. Guy founded Wealth Management Strategies, Insurance, and Financial Solutions in 1994, becoming a registered representative and going on to be a top producer in the industry for over 25 years. Guy is an active volunteer and co-founder of Endowment for Youth Committee. He has served on nonprofit boards throughout Santa Barbara County, including the Allen Hancock College Foundation, Communify, College Elementary School District, Santa Ynez Valley College Hospital Foundation, Santa Ynez Valley People Helping People, and Dunn School, where he also serves as board chair. And an interesting fact, Guy has attended every single Dunn graduation since his sophomore year in 1974. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, it's an absolute pleasure for me to have you on the show. And I'll kick you off with the first question I ask everybody, which is describe yourself as a student. Take us back.
Ooh, back all the way to the beginning?
Yeah, well, when you first saw yourself as a student, what words would you use to describe yourself?
Wow. Okay. So early memories, probably 3, 4, 5 years old. Curious, inquisitive, rambunctious. And my first teacher would be my mother.
Okay.
Encouraged that inquisitiveness and rambunctious.
Okay. Well, tell us about your mom and why she called you rambunctious.
Ooh. Well, so I'm the youngest of 3.
Okay.
I was a good student.
Yeah.
So I learned from my older brother and sisters what not to do.
Yeah.
How to maneuver and sort of get through some obstacles. But I think I was always fascinated by other people, human interactions.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that my mother recognized in me early and encouraged in me early.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Who was the first teacher outside of your family where you felt fully seen, heard, and known?
Wow. I'd say probably Mrs. Draper. It's interesting, I pause because I can probably name most of my teachers from kindergarten. Mrs. Dahlberg, who was my kindergarten teacher, through the 6th grade. But Mrs. Draper was probably that person who I wanted to impress. And I felt fully seen and fully heard by Mrs. Draper.
Why'd you want to impress her?
That's a great question. I think some of it was she was maybe one of my first crushes.
Ah, okay.
I don't know how old she would have been, but she was young enough that I was like, okay, I got that. And I had just moved to a new school, Colin P. Kelly, in Compton, that was predominantly white. Mrs. Draper was a Black teacher. I became the first student body president of that school.
Wow.
A lot of that was through the encouragement of Mrs. Draper.
Wow.
But she also demanded more of me.
I see. Well, was Mrs. Draper, I'm curious, the first non-family member teacher of color you ever had?
No.
Okay.
So my elementary school, Charles W. Bursch, my first elementary school, when kindergarten through fifth grade, mix of white and black teachers.
Okay.
But there are some folks in that group that were impressed with me. Mr. English. So you and I talk about black excellence.
Yeah.
Certainly one of my early recollections of black excellence.
Yeah.
Very demanding
Mr.
of
English.
his fourth graders.
Okay.
He was suited and booted every day.
Every day.
You could not slouch in your chair.
I see.
And he had very high. He was Mr. English was the English teacher as well as everything else. So he demanded a lot in terms of language.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there were several other teachers there, Mrs. Elston, Mrs. Kane, all black teachers, who I was aware of them. Yeah. They all knew my parents. Yeah. Which had some impact.
Okay.
But Mrs. Draper, 1968 had a different sort of impact on me.
Did you stay in touch with Mrs. Draper?
I did not. I have looked for Mrs. Draper.
I see.
But did not stay in touch with her.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. How about any of your other elementary school teachers? Any stay in touch with them, or you run into them after?
Wow, that's a good one. Not so much elementary, junior high school, some high school prior to Dunn.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I'm a musician. Yeah. And so my band teacher from junior high school, Linwood Staples, from Grambling. Yeah. Who lives in the Bay Area. Yeah. I'm in touch with him periodically.
That's awesome.
And my first high school music teacher, Dennis Patterson, who lives in Arizona now.
That's awesome.
Also Grambling graduate.
So interesting there. You slipped in that you went to Dunn. You transitioned from public schools to a private school that's pretty far away from Compton, California. How did you learn about this? How did you transition? What was the circumstances? Why did you come to Dunn?
So, come from a family where education was a priority. Yeah. I think like a lot of kids, I was one of those kids who there never was a question about whether or not I'm going to go to college. Yeah. You're going to go to college. So by the time I'm junior high school, heading into high school, it's not really so much a question of whether or not I'm going, but like a lot of teenagers, I didn't really understand how you get into college.
I got it. Yeah.
And I knew that there was an expectation that, well, Guy, you're smart enough, so you must know this. And it's like, no, I don't really know this. I know it has something to do with grades, but beyond that, I don't really understand this process. Compton was also shifting at the time. So Compton was a burgeoning black, working upper middle class black community. Right. That was very rapidly shifting into what many people think of Compton today, the whole straight out of Compton concept. It is the birthplace of the Bloods and the Crips. Yeah. And by the time I was hitting high school, it was in full effect. And so my concerns about going to college were increasing because I knew a lot of my peers were not going to college.
Talk about the circumstances of life in Compton when you get to Dominguez.
So it transitioned fairly quickly. I would say through junior high school, Compton was a wonderful place to live. Yeah. Great friends. You could kind of move around Compton. By the time ninth grade hit, the gang situation was changing. Violence was changing, a bit more drug infested. By the time I was going to head to Dominguez as a sophomore, Compton really had changed. And there was a shootout at Compton at Dominguez High School, where I was attending at the time. And that shootout happened to be the same day that mother came home and said, a friend of ours knows of some private boarding schools up in Santa Barbara, California. Wow. And would I be interested in looking? And I was like, yes. Wow. Because for me, the private boarding school meant this might be a ticket into college.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so we came up and we were supposed to look at Dunn, Thatcher, and Kate.
Okay.
Dunn was first on the stop.
Got it.
I got here and Dunn didn't look anything like I thought a private boarding school college preparatory school.
Describe it. Describe it. What did you see?
Oh, it was dusty.
Okay.
Dusty. And then what would I say? Yes, dusty.
I see.
A lot of bugs. A lot of what I would call poorly dressed, raggedy dressing, long hair.
Say it.
That was the teachers.
Yeah.
The students weren't really much better. So this is the early 70s.
Yeah.
Sort of the tail end of the hippie generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unimpressed.
Culture shock?
A bit of a culture shock.
Okay.
And I think in part because I had a stereotype of wear the blue blazers and the little tie and the nice buildings and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there was none of that here.
Yeah, yeah.
Took the entry test or whatever and did fine.
Yeah.
And then we were supposed to go look at Thatcher and Kate, and I had pretty much determined I'm not doing the private boarding school thing because I've seen one, you've seen them all.
I see.
So we're heading back home to Compton, and I'm sitting in the back seat of the car reading the brochures that Dunn had given me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the brochures says 98% of the kids who graduate from Dunn matriculate into their freshman year in college. I asked the guy who had referred me to the school, I said, what does matriculate? He said, that means they attend their freshman year right out of college. I said, okay. And he said, the other 2% take a sabbatical before they start their freshman year.
Wow. Okay.
What's a sabbatical?
Yeah.
He said, that means they go to Europe before they start college.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So 98 plus 2, So you tell me 100% of the kids who graduate go to college. That was sort of part one to sort of move me towards maybe thinking about coming to Dunn.
Yeah.
And then the second piece was those teachers that I had met.
The long-haired ones.
The long-haired ones that I was so unimpressed by.
Yeah.
They had their resumes.
Mm-hmm. In the brochure.
In the brochure.
Okay.
And I'm reading Steve Gill, Cal Berkeley, Nick Thatcher, Yale, Stu Thompson, Yale.
Wow.
Bill Webb, who was head of school at the time, Princeton.
Wow.
And then the guy who interviewed me, who I really, he was the long hair, English.
Yeah.
It was probably 80 degrees. He had a wool turtleneck sweater on.
Oh,
I'm not feeling this guy.
Yeah.
Soft-spoken, couldn't really understand him.
Yeah.
Oxford.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, none of these people look like what I thought Cal Berkeley, Yale, Princeton, Oxford.
Yeah.
And 100% of the kids go to college.
Yeah.
Maybe I should give it a try.
That was it.
Yeah.
You told Mom? And
I told Mom, yeah. So, Mom, people often ask me, why did your parents send you? My parents didn't send me.
Yeah.
My parents created an opportunity for me to make a decision.
Got it.
And my decision was, let's give this a shot.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So I asked guests if I gave them a magic wand and they could wave it and 5 of the teachers in life could appear for a dinner, who would they pick? I don't know if Miss Draper shows up or not, but you got the magic wand in your hand, guys. 5.
Well, I'm a fudge a bit, so that would be my mother.
Okay.
Peggy Draper.
Got it.
Probably Linwood Staples, band teacher. Probably Dolores Davis, history teacher in junior high school.
Okay.
I know I'm going to leave out somebody that I really want in there that's not coming to mind. And Jeremy James.
Jeremy James.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about the last 2.
Dolores Davis and Jeremy James.
Yeah.
So Dolores Davis had a bit of the Peggy Draper impact on me.
I see.
She, certainly when we were in junior high school, she was a younger professional, a Black woman who just exuded success and excellence. high standards,
Yeah.
very demanding. Impressive in that regard. Didn't suffer fools much. I think had high expectations. So, I think about when I look at sort of this resume, I said to you that I was the first student body president at Colin P. Kelly, which is part of what's interesting about that is when I came to Kelly was primarily a white school.
I see.
And they hadn't had a student body.
I see.
So I become student body president. I leave there 3 years later, ninth grader, I'm student body president.
Wow.
And Mrs. Davis, much like Mrs. Draper, had an impact on that happening.
Wow.
So I think that's part of what captured me about Mrs. Davis. I also have to say is that years later, after I graduated from Dunn, when I went back to Compton to recruit kids to come to Dunn, Mrs. Davis is one of the classes that I went to recruit kids. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And Jeremy?
And Jeremy. So Jeremy James, the guy who I had said, I'm not feeling this guy.
Yeah.
I don't get the whole English thing. He's too soft-spoken. He was a chain smoker.
Got the wool sweater on.
Got the wool. So I'm like, different guy.
Okay.
But Jeremy was probably the one adult on campus that I probably shared the most with.
Interesting.
So he became that guy.
Why?
I don't know what. I can't really tell you why. I have a feeling Jeremy made himself available to me.
So what kind of things would you share with him that you couldn't share with anyone else?
So, and I discovered some things that Jeremy and I had in common. So Jeremy had this unbelievable record collection.
Wow.
He lived off campus, but in his house, like literally around the front room, there were albums all the way around the room.
Wow.
And he may say to you, what do you want to hear? And it's like, how about Miles Davis' Kind of Blood? And he'd know exactly where it was.
Wow.
So that was one piece. He was also the person who took a lot of us into town for a variety of things, including Bob Marley. Went to Bob Marley concert at Isla Vista.
Wow.
Tower of Power. Jeremy was that guy.
Wow.
And so I think I discovered, we had the music thing in common. I played soccer.
Yeah.
Much to my chagrin. I was a pretty good athlete, but I didn't know anything about soccer.
Yeah.
I probably should have been on varsity sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
But instead, I was the captain of the JV team.
Yeah.
And Jeremy was the coach.
Got it.
So there was that. And I think in my darkest hours, again, I think I've probably shared this story with you before.
Yeah.
The summer coming to Dunn.
Yeah.
I lost a brother.
Yeah.
Jeremy was, I think, the only person who I shared that with.
The whole time?
The whole time.
Wow.
So my brother was killed in July of 73.
Yeah.
I showed up to Dunn in August of 73.
My God.
And didn't realize probably until 5, 6, 7 years later, oh, so that's what being in shock is, right? Because I think I was sort of detached from things.
Wow.
And so Jeremy knew that, and Jeremy really kept that secret, that confidence from me.
Yeah. How did you tell him?
I probably was, honestly, I don't really remember. I think I was probably having, one of those emotional moments.
Yeah, yeah.
As I had fairly frequently at times. And I don't know, Jeremy either appeared or I decided I needed to talk to somebody. And it could have been even, I think I want to go home.
Wow.
But I know that the teenager in me, the adolescence in me, probably knew enough to know I need an adult to communicate this with.
Wow.
And he was the adult.
We talk about being seen, heard, and known. And you talk about Jeremy's seeing you and knowing you in a way that you're not sharing with anyone else. But you're also experiencing such shock. And it's you have to explain this to me. You're living in shock. You transition from public school to private school. You do your time here and you move on. But you come back and again and again. And next year will be your 50th consecutive graduation. Yes. I don't know if there's a world record for it. I don't know anybody else who'd be in the running.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
I should be in the Guinness Book of something.
Yeah, so but why?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's interesting. I can now look back and see a bit of who I was at Dunn for those 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is, I was a pretty serious person.
Yeah.
I could have fun. I could laugh. I could do that. Yeah. But when I look back at that young man, I know that I was in shock. I know that, I was sort of going through the motions. Yeah. I know that I was very focused on, no matter how bad it seems here, I'm on a mission. I need to if I graduate, because 98 plus 2 is 100. Yeah. If I graduate, I'm going to college. Yeah. So that became my North Star.
That's it.
And everything else, and there were things, it was just, culturally, it was a challenge at times.
But it wasn't a means to an end. Because if it was a means to an end, you wouldn't have came back for graduation.
Yeah. And
why?
Yeah. So in fact, one of the things that's ironic is I said over and over when I was a student here, I can't wait to graduate. I'm never coming back.
Oh, really?
I'm never, ever coming back. I can't wait to leave San Ynez Valley. Okay. And get back to a real city. Okay. And so then I graduate, and I had become a bit of a leader. Yeah. I certainly became a leader as it related to, I would say, students of color in general, but certainly Black students, of which there weren't a lot of us. Right. But I was the big brother to some folks who were coming up behind me.
That makes sense.
There were 3 Black students that were in the class behind me. Right. Willard, Steve, and Steve. So when I graduated, went off to Vassar College, came back, I had to go to their graduation.
Got it.
Those are my little brothers.
Yeah, of course.
So I go to their graduation, and it was fine. The following year, there was another young man, a Black student who was graduating. I had to come to his. Yeah. Well, that kept happening. Yeah. I would come to alumni weekends, not every year, but came to a lot of alumni weekends. Yeah. But what happened, Cal, really is it was more of a function of initially, there's a saying I use sometimes, as you climb, lift. Right? So it's like, in the beginning, I probably really wasn't that wild about coming back. Right. But I'm coming back for Steve and Steve. Right. And then I'm coming back for Lawrence. And then I'm coming back for, well, at some point, it's now 8, 9, 10 years later, and there are new Black kids who are coming on campus, and I'm coming to orientations and meeting them and being big brother to them. And so now I got to come back for their graduation. Yeah. And now it's 15 years into the deal. And then it's 20 years into the deal. And I think around 20 years into the deal, the current head of school, who is escaping me right now, that might have been Steve Loy, says, have you been at every graduation? I said, yes, I've been at every graduation. And he announced at the graduation, this is Guy Walker's 20th consecutive graduation. Wow. And so it sort of became a thing. And at some point, my attitude about Dunn also changed in the sense of, I did not have a bad experience while I was here. Yeah. But I didn't appreciate the experience while I was here.
Understand. Yeah. Well, Guy, you talk a lot about community wealth. And there's something about that story, about being drawn back by Steve Frazier, Steve Osmond, coming back to their graduation at almost like an obligation. You're part of a community wealth stream, and you can't take yourself out of it.
Right.
I talk about that.
Wow, that's good. I think that community wealth piece has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
I defined it maybe 20 years ago. I think intuitively, perhaps, and perhaps through my training as a child, I think I've always recognized that community is important. And I think you're right. I think my relationships at Dunn, a lot of that had to do with there were people within my community.
Right.
And then as I graduated, there were people behind that were a part of that community or should become a part of that community. I think there's a leadership piece of me that said, well, if we're going to expand this community, and I don't know how much of this was always conscious. At some point, it probably became more conscious. But I do think it's a part of my personal philosophy about the importance of building community wealth that has kept me engaged here and in other places.
So there is the question I want to end on. And it's a question I'm asking in light of the fact that every single guest we're having this season is an entrepreneur like yourself. There's something about your entrepreneurship that's tied to the idea of community wealth, that's tied to your education, the way you learned. And I'd like you to speak to it. What's the through thread? What ties it together?
So I'm a man of faith. And I think sort of the evolution of Guy Walker is what are we here for? A lot of it for me is community. A lot of it is our role is not to fix things. Our role is to make things better. And so I think people sometimes get frustrated because they see a problem, they want to fix it, and they can't fix it. I've been in that space. I'm not really in that space now and haven't been for a while. My role, my purpose, my God purpose really is how do I help things be better than I found them? And to connect people. That's part of the answer to that. And so, again, I mean, community wealth is the second of the three pillars. So cultural wealth, how well do you know yourself? Where are your values, your principles? Community wealth is really the work that we all should be doing.
That's right.
And then capital wealth certainly are the tools that allow us very often to do these things. So community to me that's where it all begins and ends. First community being your family.
That's right. And you started there with your mom. Appreciate that. Guy, I know what you said will inspire others to share and reflect on the teachers in their lives. I think what you said about community wealth, the power of community is something that will resonate with folks. Being seen and heard and known, not just in an individual way, but in the spirit of a tribe that comes together. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, brother.
Thank you. We say on the show, class dismissed. The Whole Student Podcast has been brought to you by Dunncast. Produced by J.D. Scroggin, the Director of Marketing and Communication at the Dunn School, and co-produced by Brandon Scott of Comfort Food. Thank you for joining us.